They bailed out the people who made the worst bets in history. Instead of letting failure cleanse the system, they printed money to save them and quietly robbed everyone else. You didn't buy silver to get rich. You bought silver to protect yourself from inflation. And for 17 years, we lived inside a mirage. Zero interest rates, endless quantitative easing, a market that never had to take its medicine. Instead of jailing bad actors, instead of letting leverage unwind, we chose the easy path. Now an entire generation thinks they're financial geniuses, just sitting 100% long, fully exposed, because the Fed never lets markets clear. That's not intelligence. That's a rigged game. This is inflation. That spear is inflation, and we're the ones taking it. So when people saw silver added to the US critical minerals list, emotions flared. Almost immediately, AI-generated videos started popping up claiming gold and silver are about to be confiscated. Let's stop right there. If confiscation were actually happening, it wouldn't be subtle. It would be loud, explicit, and perhaps challenged in court. The last time the US government confiscated gold, it was in 1933 through Executive Order 6102. And here's the part most people never talk about. Numismatic coins were exempt. Even during the strictest period of metals controls in US history, collectible, scarce coins sat outside that system. I'm not saying confiscation is coming. I'm saying risk isn't binary. It's probabilistic. And that's why blindly stacking ounces and ignoring scarcity, history, and classification misses the point. Because history doesn't say all metal is treated equally. It's the evening of Wednesday, December 17th, 2025. Silver closing yet again at a new all-time high, over $66 an ounce. The other thing that drew my attention last night, the Aussie dollar is trading now at over $100 an ounce in Aussie dollars. The main thing I wanted to talk about today is silver confiscation. You know, over the last month, as I've been logging in on YouTube and seeing the video recommendations it's making, I'm starting to see a lot of AI-generated videos in the gold and silver space. As you can imagine, with the metals rallying to new all-time highs over the latter part of this year, it probably got attention from certain folks who said, oh, let me leverage AI tools to generate a bunch of slurp videos. And I think a lot of you know what I'm talking about. The one that's getting pushed out a lot content is just a bunch of AI images, and then you have this Asian guy speaking on the side. I'm even starting to question if this guy is real or it's a real image and they just got it to speak. I don't know. But more interesting is now these videos are getting pushed out on all types of different channel names. So it's almost like they're mining for views with this material. And so the interesting part is their video was one of the ones that drew my attention to Samsung. They started making claims that, oh, Samsung is now making batteries that need a whole lot of silver. If I don't remember correctly, egregious claims of like 1 kilo of silver per solid state battery. And that got me digging. I said, is this for real or what's going on here? And so that was in the last video. I discussed that, yes, Samsung did in fact go to Mexico. They went to Mexico because Mexico's the country with the highest mining production of silver. And so that's how they collaborated with the mine down there to get their silver. And so the latest one that AI channel is kind of pushing around in all different channels is essentially silver confiscation. And it started claiming, you know, we've all been talking about, oh, silver and copper have been added to the critical minerals list for 2025. And this person is claiming that there's some legislation that came out that claims, you know, oh, there's some implicit authorization there to cease privately owned metals like a critical metal like silver. And so, okay, let's go QA this information. And I started Googling, started looking at the documentation, and there is no explicit information or even semi implicit that they're authorized to seize the metal. I mean, that was the thing about that video. It creates these AI videos and it's not presenting the evidence, it just rambles on. It doesn't provide you the references or anything. And so in my review of the documentation, I actually leveraged AI. I started feeding the language learning models a bunch of these documents, and I said, run through this. And I kept prompting, and I'm like, is there anywhere in there saying, even implicitly, that they can seize the silver? Nothing. But very explicitly, it's stating that the designation focuses on supply chains, permitting, and industrial access. And so what history has taught us, and I think what we should expect if it were to happen, true confiscation would be more explicit. It would be loud, and I think it would draw so much attention from people who are even professionals in the wealthy who are trying to protect their wealth, that it would generate immediate litigation. While there doesn't seem to be an impending confiscation on the horizon, is there a precedent we could lean on to say probabilistically, can this happen again? And it actually has happened. In 1933, FDR issued Executive Order 6102. It explicitly outlawed monetary gold ownership, and so Mexicans were forced to sell gold at a fixed price. But, this is important, numismatic and collectible coins were exempt. If you noticed earlier in the video, you might have seen Exter's Pyramid. And Exter's Pyramid was something generated by John Exter. He was a former governor of the Federal Reserve Board between 1948 and 1951. So this guy was a central banker. And he created this pyramid that had gold at the base, considered as the ultimate risk-free money. And then at the top, you have the highly leveraged financial claims at the top. Those are the most vulnerable during a crisis. So the irony is this guy was a central banker and he was known. This was the 1960s that he published this pyramid. In the 60s, it was still illegal for Americans to own gold. This guy built up a massive stash of numismatic coins. And so because these numismatic coins were exempt from Executive Order 6102, he was allowed to own them. And that was the way he protected himself from inflation. So how ironic is that? So while it doesn't look like it's going to happen now, given that there's a precedent that this has happened in our history, the risk is there. There is a probability of this risk. It's not simply black and white. Is it happening or is it not happening? There's a certain probability. And in general, people in markets, they misprice tail risk. They think, oh, this can't happen. That was such a long time ago. It can't happen. And this is why I think diversifying, if you're stacking or if you have own silver miner stocks, diversification in this asset class is absolute key. And I just showed you that history shows that all metal is not traded equally. And I wanted to highlight this because a lot of the social media groups, the big social media groups that are focused in on silver, many times on this channel, I talked about the Reddit group of Wall Street Silver, Silver Degen Club, and a lot of people talk about what they're stacking and what they're building. And there seems to be this, it's not a blanket statement, but it's definitely a concentrated amount of people that are all about building weight and having ounces, and who cares about that scarce, expensive coin? Because with all that premium paying on that high-graded coin with low mintage, I could buy more ounces. I could buy more 10-ounce bars, 25-ounce bars, 100-ounce bars. But what you're not taking into account is this potential risk that at some point in the future, there's a chance it could get confiscated. And then what? In terms of scarcity, the bars and the generics, they have the highest confiscation risk. And yes, there are caveats. There's some very specialty bars out there that are sought after by collectors. Few of them were created That's its own little niche, its own little ball game there. But I'm talking about general generic bars that are just mass produced. Those have the highest confiscation risk. And then when I started collecting, I immediately went to what I knew, what's familiar to me, and that's the American Silver Eagle. And so while I think that's always a better option than generics, and I think more people are becoming cognizant of that, there's people who've noticed for one reason or another, family emergencies, hard economic times, they're finding themselves that they have to sell some of their metals. And the people that concentrated their effort on generics are now finding out, oh my God, they're not even paying me spot for this. They're buying back from me at a discount to spot. That's not happening on the American Eagle side. And I'm aware of some YouTube channels that all they do is call dealers and ask for quotes, and they are getting quoted a discount on American Silver Eagles. But that's brick and mortar. That's a sample selection bias. You're only calling one part of the market. I've talked about the Reddit group PMs for sale. There's other private Facebook groups. There's people on Instagram that you can transact with. And because there's no brick and mortar, that fixed cost associated with brick and mortar, you're likely not going to get quoted under spot unless they're cold or damaged in some way. And then when we move on to the other continuum in scarcity is the silver Libertads. And I had shown you that they're very scarce. And right now, they're not selling at their true scarcity. And I'll show you shortly. They're being mispriced, even by big online retailers. I've highlighted on this channel many times how the Mexican Libertad is so much scarcer than the American Silver Eagle. 19 times more scarce, to be precise. There are exceptions, as always, in anything in life. And so American Silver Eagle has a couple of its very sought-after varietals. The most sought after, that 1995 W Silver Proof, quite expensive. If you have an MS-70, the top pop for that one, talking over $10,000 right now. There's also a 2019 Enhanced Reverse Proof from one of the specific mint marks. That one's also very highly sought after. But for a given randomly chosen year, in general, the Mexican Libertad, scarcer, 19 times more scarcer. And what I'm showcasing here is essentially how the market is mispricing this scarcity. In the past, you're seeing screen grabs from Apmex looking for the sales page on a random year American Silver Eagle and the sales page side by side for a Mexican 1-ounce silver Libertad, also random year. Historically, traditionally, on the right side, the Libertad, they would be priced much higher. And that scared people off, saying, well, why should I pay more for what's not familiar to me? I'm American. I live in the United States. Well, I'm not going to pay all that for a Mexican coin. Why? But now we're in a situation, you have a much scarcer coin, 19 times scarcer, and it's selling for the same exact price as an American Silver Eagle. I mean, the choice is very obvious. You want to go for the more scarcer item for the same price. These prices are from last night, and so I'm pulling them up right now because silver rallied. This was last night already when in the futures market, silver was above 66 an ounce. And so right now, we're after the market closed today, and it's about, looking at both of them, 50 cents to 53 cents higher than what you're seeing here on this screen. And here's what I've highlighted over and over. American Silver Eagles, they started being minted 1986. The stats here are through the end of 2024 just because of the fiasco and the lack of clarity into what Banco de Mexico is doing for 2025. So we don't include the 2025 numbers in here to make a fair comparison. And the Silver Libertad, they started minting those in 1982, so even more years. And through the end of 2024, just over 35 million minted. So we're talking about a 19 times rarity difference. And yet now you have one of the biggest dealers, and I'm seeing it also on other dealers' pages. You have the Eagles priced as high, and I think what's driving that is excessive demand because people feel familiar. It's the American coin. That's what I'm going to buy. But they have not yet learned you have a lot of new market participants. They're like, oh, wow, silver, new all-time high. Remember I talked about the wealth effect? So they're getting in on it. They're just learning. A year from now, it may finally click. Oh, wow, the Libertads are much rarer and they have less of a confiscation risk. Wow, I should diversify and buy some of those as well. For those of you that are already Libertad aficionados, I had hinted in my last video that I actually believe that the Mexican silver Libertad is probably about half that mintage in reality. And actually, there was a comment in the last video where somebody hinted where I was going with this and what I'm going to publish in US Mex next year. And his name goes by it looks like a Spanglish mix. Peso un Boxer 1507. He left a comment, very long comment. I'm not going to read it all, it's quite lengthy, but he really highlights culturally how silver is treated in Mexico. For years, for the longest time, people were handling Libertads like pocket change. Silver in general is culturally important to them because if you look at Mexico's history, they have undergone several huge monetary crises where there was just massive devaluations seemingly almost overnight. And so for the Mexican families, it became a best practice to like, I should save in silver, whether it be Libertads or whether I have, some American 90% quarters, the old quarters. It was normal for them to save because, hey, somebody's gotten crushed. We know somebody that got crushed in a crisis. We don't want to have that happen to us. And so now we're talking about one specific macroeconomic indicator. Now what happens in a situation where you couple a devaluation in the same year that silver price rallies? Well, then the Mexican that sells into that, not only are they going to make up for the devaluation of the Mexican peso, but oh, look, silver rallied this year. And they go and they sell their Libertads. And if they're so mistreated for the longest time, these were not collectible coins. They were almost treated like bullion back in the days. It is very likely that a huge amount of them went to refiners, got melted. The other cultural thing, jewelers would just melt Libertads. I heard this from a numismatist, a Mexican numismatist. He told us directly, a jeweler would just go buy themselves a stack of Libertads. They didn't go, oh, look at this. Oh, what year is this? No. Just, get it ready to make jewelry. That's all they cared about. Today's featured coin is not actually a Mexican coin. It's considered a Mexican metal. And so the first question is, what's the difference? So a coin is considered legal tender and typically has a printed face value, whereas a metal doesn't have any type of denomination face value. But that raises another question. You're going to say, well, the Libertad doesn't actually have a denomination on it. And the Libertad is very unique in that way because it is considered official legal tender status in Mexico. It's authorized under the Mexican monetary law, and their legal tender value is defined by the metal content, not a printed face value. So the Libertad is unique in that way. I'm showcasing this metal for two reasons. One, as I'll talk about shortly, I consider it a hidden gem, so it has a lot of upside potential. And two, this was a metal that one of several metals that drew my attention to Mexican coins and metals. I'd mentioned my friend Bullion Cat. He was the one that drew me to this sphere. He was posting on Reddit in Wall Street Silver, and this is one of those metals he posted in the first days I started viewing. I'm like, wow, that is a nice, I called it a coin at the time. I didn't understand the distinguishment between coin and metal. I was like, wow, that is a nice coin. That's really awesome. And next thing you know, I'm collecting Libertads. This metal is from the year 2000, known by NGC and PCGS as the Winged Victory Millennium metal. And essentially on the this side of the metal, it says Mexico Año 2000. And let's take a look on the other side. The other side of the metal says Salud, Prosperidad, Esperanza, essentially translating to health, prosperity, and hope. I'm showing you here this eBay auction that shows you what it looks like in the original government packaging. It's a capsule, round capsule, flat capsule with a wider diameter than the metal itself, that kind of has like the information. It's kind of like dual certificate of authenticity and a number that pertains to how which one it was produced, like a mintage. And so for the longest time, several Mexican collectors and myself had really never seen a number greater than 50,000 on there. So it was kind of implicitly assumed maybe there's only 50,000 mintage. And there's one collector of Mexican numismatics. He's in Instagram, goes by the moniker of BC Treasure Hunter. He actually said that he found one over 50,000. So we're kind of thinking, maybe it's 55,000 or maybe it's 59,000, but there's nothing that's been exceeded over the 50,000s. So when I think it's a hidden gem, this is scarcer than, say, the 98 Libertad. And because it's an absolute stunning metal, I think it has a lot of upside potential. Let's have a look at the current eBay sold comps for this metal. And as you can imagine, there's probably a bunch of different terms you could use in your search query on eBay. To just simplify and give you one example, I used Mexico 2000 silver Millennium. It's a term that seems to get used a lot in a lot of the item titles. And so I turned on my sold listings filter. And the one I just showed you what it looks like in original government packaging, that one sold back in November for $185. And then we have some graded ones. This is actually a metal that's hard to get a high grade in, like very hard. For the longest, I've been searching for a 69, and I have a 64, 65, 67, 68, and 69 because I was always chasing the 69. At one point, I had over 10 of these, got them all graded, sold most of those, and so I finally have here a 69. So most examples you'll run into are not going to be 69s. Rather hard to get a 69. So this sold comp on December 6th was a proof 62 grade, and that sold for $249. On November 7th, this is a 66 PF 66 grade. So when we were looking at the brilliant uncirculated Libertads, you would see an MS. The brilliant uncirculated gets associated with the term mint state. The proof, they use PF designation, and on the PCGS side, they use PR. And so this is an NGC graded one, PF 66, and that one sold on November 7th for $375. On November 13th, a PF 68 sold for $575. So the higher the grade, they start creeping up substantially in price. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned. We're just getting started.